At 6:10 a.m., a secret Russian reinforcement convoy was entering the final stretch of road leading to a pontoon bridge near Henichesk in the Kherson region. The formation stretched for more than 2.5 kilometers and consisted of 96 fuel tankers, 84 logistics trucks, and 16 BMP armored vehicles providing escort, carrying nearly 1,900 tons of fuel, along with approximately 760 tons of military supplies. After a series of strikes on railway and road bridges, this pontoon bridge had become one of the few crossing routes Russia could still use. But the convoy was still about 15 to 20 minutes away from the bridge. Ukraine knew the schedule in advance and wanted to complete the entire trap before the first vehicles moved onto the bridge. What Ukraine had no idea about was that at around 6:08 a.m., a Russian electronic reconnaissance receiving station near the bridgehead had detected unusual signals in the area. They knew UAV activity was being prepared, but they still did not know exactly where the control station was located. Just 1 minute earlier, at 6:09 a.m., 10 Ukrainian FPV drones had taken off simultaneously from ambush positions about 11 kilometers northeast of the bridge. They flew low at nearly 120 kilometers per hour, racing toward Henichesk. The objective was not to attack the convoy immediately. Ukraine wanted to prepare the bridge first, then wait for the Russian convoy to drive into it on its own. A few minutes later, the 10 FPV drones approached a Russian defensive position along the route leading to the pontoon bridge. The fortification consisted of trenches, sandbags, gun emplacements, and observation positions facing the coastal area. The lead FPV dropped close to the ground and accelerated to nearly 130 kilometers per hour. When the fortification was only about 60 meters away, it flew straight into a gun emplacement. The explosion opened the first gap. 4 other FPVs immediately followed, striking a trench, 2 firing positions, and an observation post near the road leading onto the bridge. Smoke and dust quickly covered the defensive line. 5 FPVs were gone. The remaining 5 flew through the gap, but they were not the main attack force. Behind them, the vampire Baba Yaga began moving in. The 6-rotor hexacopter carried a 75 kilograms explosive charge suspended beneath its body. Every time it changed direction, the payload swung like a pendulum, forcing the pilot to make extremely gentle control inputs. The remaining 5 FPVs spread out ahead and to both sides, forming a mobile escort screen. In the middle of the formation, Baba Yaga continued toward Henichesk. Meanwhile, the Russian convoy was still moving closer to the bridge. At an altitude of about 80 m, Baba Yaga was little more than a small dark shape against the gray sky and coastal smoke. 5 escort FPVs spread out around it, trying to draw attention away from the heavy UAV. On the Ukrainian screen, Koalitsiya-SV picked up multiple video feeds from Russian FPVs operating around the area. This allowed the control crew to monitor where some of the enemy UAVs were looking. Most of Russia's attention still appeared to be focused on the smaller FPVs ahead. Baba Yaga did not appear to have been spotted yet, but it was not invisible. Now, the signals detected before the attack began started to matter. Every control input sent to Baba Yaga produced a brief transmission, and Silok receiving points around the area began comparing their bearings to gradually narrow down the direction of the Ukrainian control station. Koalitsiya-SV told Ukraine where the enemy was looking. Silok was trying to find out where the operator was sitting. While the signal hunt continued quietly in the background, Baba Yaga kept moving toward the most important target, the system keeping the pontoon bridge in position. Baba Yaga crossed the final stretch of shoreline and moved out over the water near Henichesk. Below were bomb craters, scorched sections of road, and the old bridge that had been damaged multiple times. Beside it was Russia's temporary crossing route. Unlike a concrete bridge, a pontoon bridge is made up of multiple floating sections connected together. A damaged section can be pulled out and replaced. That was why Ukraine did not want to simply create another hole in the bridge surface. They needed to strike the system that kept the entire crossing in position. On Baba Yaga's camera, the pilot began to see the anchoring system near the opposite bank where steel cables kept the pontoon sections from being pulled out of alignment by the current. That was the real weak point. In the distance, the Russian convoy had appeared on the road leading to the bridge. BMPs were in front, followed by trucks and a long line of fuel tankers. The distance was closing quickly. Baba Yaga began to descend. But just as the pilot started bringing Baba Yaga down toward that weak point, Russia had also just completed another task, determining the direction of the control signal. When Baba Yaga was only about 2 kilometers from the bridge, the Silok receiving points had narrowed the signal source down to the area of a Ukrainian fortification about 4 kilometers from the bridge. 2 Russian FPVs were immediately launched toward that location. Behind them, 3 other FPV signals also began moving into the area. Above, a Russian reconnaissance UAV continued to observe, while a Tu-S-35 Koalitsiya-SV self-propelled howitzer waited for the final coordinates. Chuika-4 picked up the 2 lead video feeds. They were heading straight toward the control bunker. But at the pontoon bridge, another problem appeared. Baba Yaga's image began breaking into blocks of pixels. The camera froze, reappeared for half a second, then disappeared again. The pilot pushed the controls to the right. Baba Yaga responded almost a second late, causing the 75 kilograms explosive charge to swing sideways and pull the UAV sharply off balance. He changed frequency. No effect. He changed again. Still nothing. Russia's Zhitel R-330Zh was jamming radio links and positioning signals in the area. The pilot was forced to increase transmission power. The control link pushed through the interference long enough for the image to return, although the positioning signal remained unstable. He relied on the camera to guide Baba Yaga back toward the bridge. He had just saved the UAV. But the stronger signal also meant Silok could hear him more clearly. Before, the Russian side only knew the signal source was somewhere within a broad area. Now, that area was shrinking quickly. Ahead, Baba Yaga had only one task left. Place the 75 kilograms explosive charge before the Russian FPVs reached the bunker. Before Baba Yaga arrived, Ukrainian artillery had suppressed several Russian fortifications that had been identified by reconnaissance in advance, but well-camouflaged positions remained intact. Baba Yaga crossed halfway over the pontoon bridge and slowed near the opposite bank. The pilot identified the anchoring system and began lowering the winch. The 75 kilograms explosive charge slowly descended toward the placement point. A gust of wind pushed the UAV nearly 2 meters off course. The pilot corrected, but the signal delay caused the payload below to keep swinging. Only a few meters remained. Then a 12.7 millimeters DSK suddenly opened fire from a sandbag position about 400 meters away. The first bursts went low. The next came close to Baba Yaga. The pilot could not bank sharply or accelerate because the explosive charge was still hanging beneath it. One Ukrainian FPV immediately broke away from the formation. It dropped close to the ground, circled toward the flank of the position, then accelerated over the final few dozen meters. The Russian gunner swung the DSGK toward the new target and opened fire, but the FPV was already too close. It slammed into the sandbags beside the gun. The explosion threw dirt and debris across the position. The DSK fell silent. Ukraine had just lost another FPV. Only 4 escorts remained. But just 2 seconds later, another machine gun opened fire from a camouflaged bunker about 300 meters to the south. New streams of fire cut across the screen. Baba Yaga had reached the correct position. The explosive charge was only a few meters from the placement point. 2 escort FPVs immediately turned toward the camouflaged bunker, forcing the Russian gunner to swing his weapon away from Baba Yaga. They did not dive into the target, but repeatedly approached from 2 directions, needing only to buy the heavy UAV a few more seconds. When the machine gun was forced to stop firing and withdraw into the fortification, the 2 FPVs immediately broke away from the area and returned to the formation. And at that exact moment, 4 kilometers from the bridge, the attack on Baba Yaga's own operator also began. The first Russian FPV appeared above the control bunker. A Ukrainian anti-drone team in the adjacent trench opened fire, causing it to lose control and crash a few meters from the fortification. The second did not repeat the same approach. It came in low from the east and slammed into the outer wall. The blast shook the entire bunker, sent dirt falling from the ceiling, and knocked the Chuika-4 off its mount. Behind them, 3 more Russian FPVs were still approaching. But the Ukrainian pilot still could not leave the controls. On the main screen, Baba Yaga was still hovering above the anchoring system, with the 75 kilograms explosive charge almost touching the placement point. He activated the preloaded automatic command sequence: hold position until the payload was fully lowered, retract the cable, then gain altitude, and withdraw from the area along the backup route. The pilot and the observer rushed out of the bunker and ran through the communication trench toward a backup fortification about 40 meters away. The final section had collapsed, leaving about 10 meters of open ground. They started running. Behind the Russian lines, the two S-35 Koalitsiya-SV had received targeting data from the reconnaissance UAV above. A 152mm shell was fired toward the control station area. The two Ukrainians had just crossed the collapsed section of trench when a whistling sound appeared overhead. They rushed into the backup bunker. A few seconds later, the old control position was hit. The explosion tore open the roof of the fortification, threw sandbags into the air, and sent the blast wave racing along the trench. The three remaining Russian FPVs continued toward the old position, but by the time they arrived, the control bunker had already been destroyed and the Ukrainian crew had moved to the backup fortification. But the Russian side was a few seconds too late. On Baba Yaga, the final command sequence was still running. The winch motor released the remaining length of cable, lowering the 75 kilograms explosive charge beside the anchoring system. The UAV then retracted the cable, gained altitude, and withdrew from the area along the preloaded route. The bomb was in position, but Ukraine had not detonated it yet. The Russian convoy had not moved far enough onto the bridge. If the explosion happened now, the vehicles behind would stop before entering the trap. The four remaining FPVs separated from Baba Yaga and kept their distance. The escort mission was over. Now they only had to wait. A few minutes later, the first BMPs of the Russian convoy reached the entrance to the bridge. At around 6:28 a.m., the first BMPs of the Russian convoy began crawling onto the pontoon bridge. The BMPs led the formation, logistics trucks followed behind, and a long line of fuel tankers moved into the middle of the convoy. Each pontoon section sank and then rose again under the weight of the vehicles. Ukraine kept waiting. The first BMP moved farther onto the crossing. The trucks followed. Then the fuel tankers began filling the middle section of the route. That was when the four remaining FPVs appeared. Two climbed higher and then dived toward the middle of the convoy. The BMP turrets quickly swung toward them and opened fire, drawing most of the attention into the sky. The other two FPVs dropped close to the surface of the water. One headed straight toward the location where Baba Yaga had placed the explosive charge. On the camera, the anchoring system appeared through the smoke and dust, right beside the steel cables holding the bridge to the bank. The FPV dived straight toward the bomb placement point. The screen turned white. 1 second later, the 75 kilograms explosive charge left behind by Baba Yaga detonated at the anchoring system. The bridgehead lost stability. One section began drifting away from the bank and pulled the connected sections behind it out of alignment. A truck lost its line and ended up blocking the bridge. The fuel tanker behind it braked hard, while the vehicles farther back were still pushing forward. The second low-flying FPV raced through a gap between the vehicles and struck a fuel tanker trapped in the middle of the formation. Fuel spilled out and ignited, creating a large fire directly on the crossing. Above, one decoy FPV was shot down by Russian fire. The final FPV immediately changed direction and dived toward another fuel tanker a few dozen meters away. A second explosion erupted. Fire began spreading among the trapped vehicles. The vehicles in front could not turn back. Those behind could not move forward. The BMPs were squeezed between trucks and fuel tankers, while the pontoon sections beneath them continued drifting out of position. Ukraine did not need to strike every vehicle. They only needed to prepare the right weak point, wait for the right moment, and let the convoy's own congestion turn the crossing into a trap. The Russian forces had detected the signal. They had jammed Baba Yaga and destroyed the control bunker. But they were still a few seconds too late. And by the time the convoy realized it, the Henichesk crossing had turned into a sea of fire. In your opinion, what was the decisive factor in this plan, the FPVs drawing Russian fire away from the target, or placing the explosive charge precisely at the bridge's weak point? Share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and continue supporting Ukraine on its path toward peace.